Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with grilled flank steak pastrami. That's right, one of these years I will do a proper pastrami recipe, which does take a few days and a fair amount of effort. But in the meantime, I'd like to present this alternative, which only takes a couple hours and virtually no effort. So this should go over very well with the millennials in the audience. Apparently my consultants tell me you guys want everything fast and easy. Hey, I don't blame you. And while I'm not going to lie and say this was exactly like a traditional pastrami, I can tell you it was exactly like something very delicious to eat. So let's go ahead and get started. And first up, we have to do the Pastrami Spice Rub. And for that, we're going to need some freshly ground black pepper. And please note we're doing a little larger grind than we usually do. We definitely want to see some of those larger pieces of cracked pepper on the surface. And then to that, we will add the second most important pastrami spice, coriander, which, believe it or not, is made from the ground seeds of what we call cilantro. Just a little bonus spice trivia. And then, of course, we're also going to need some kosher salt, and a good amount of it, as well as some paprika and some dry mustard. And we'll go ahead and we'll give that a mix with our freakishly small wooden spoon. And as soon as that is combined, we can set it aside and move on to the flank steak. And there it is. I have one trimmed beef flank steak. And generally when you buy these, most of the tougher connective tissue has been trimmed off. But you might see a little bit of this stuff on the side, which you can trim off. I don't. By the time this is grilled, you'll never know that's there. The really tough and edible stuff is up here, and that's been removed. And then before we apply our spices, we got to do a couple things. First of all, I want to drizzle on a little bit of vegetable oil, and I want to rub that on both sides of the meat. And that's going to sort of help our spices adhere to the surface. Plus, as you may know, fat is a great transferer of flavor. So I'm going to rub down both sides. And then once that's been completed, we're going to grab a fork and get stabby with this. I'm going to go ahead and give both sides the old poka all over. And that's going to help those flavors penetrate a little more deeply into the meat. And by the way, they do make a special tool to do this with that you definitely shouldn't buy, especially if you have access to forks. And once our flank has been thoroughly poked, we can go ahead and apply the spices. So I'm going to use half on each side. We will sprinkle it over and give it a good rub. And if it looks like I'm putting a lot on here, I am. In fact, it may have been a little too much. But as usual, I will put the appropriate amounts on the blog post. But anyway, we're going to apply a very generous coat of the rub to both sides, at which point the prep on this is done. And then what I'm going to suggest is we wrap this right back up in the same butcher paper and pop that in the fridge for anywhere between 2 hours and overnight. And sure, if you're just absolutely horrible at time management and you have to cook this right now, it's probably going to be fine. I mean, just a plain grilled flank steak is delicious. So if you have the wicked munchies and have to cook it right away, go ahead. But I did pop mine into the fridge for a couple hours to let those flavors penetrate thoroughly, at which point we can pull it out and start thinking about grilling this. And for most things that I marinate for the grill, I generally don't let them warm up to room temp. But in this case, I do recommend leaving this out for about 30 minutes to come up a little closer to room temp. And I will explain why in the post. But I do think for this particular recipe that works a little better. So I did let mine sit out for about 20-30 minutes, after which I headed to the grill to cook this up. And as usual, I'm using some nice charcoal. Remember, pastrami is smoked. So while you can cook this any way you want, I really think this is the way you want to go. And right here, just by reflex, I gave it the old half turn so I could get those beautiful grill marks, which for something like this is kind of pointless. Because we do have such a thick layer of spice rub on there, you're really not going to get much in the way of grill marks, as you can see. In fact, unlike most grilled things, this doesn't look particularly good until it's done. But anyway, we're going to grill it up to our desired degree of doneness, which for me, for this dish, is medium. As you know, I generally lean more towards medium rare for grilled steaks, but because we're attempting some kind of faux pastrami here, we want something that's going to have a little firmer of a texture. And of course, I always recommend testing with a thermometer, so at least if something goes wrong, you can blame the thermometer. And I was shooting for something around 135-ish. Okay, I still want it pink, but like I said, I do want it a little firmer than what you get with a rare or medium rare. And then once our meat is done to our liking, we'll pull that off, and we will let that rest. And rest really well. All right, if you want to eat this nice and hot, go ahead. Let it rest 5 minutes and start slicing, but not me. I let mine cool down at least 15 minutes. I wanted to make sure all those juices had time to redistribute. And for optimum texture and maximum flavor, I think just warm is perfect. And then once our meat has rested properly, we'll go ahead and slice it thinly against the grain. As you know, only a psychopath slices with the grain. And as Food Wishes tradition dictates, I will stop after a few slices and give it a little taste, which was amazing. Smoky, delicious, and as far as the flavor goes, fairly pastrami-like. And yes, absolutely, you could just slice this and serve it dinner plate style. But I was more in the mood for a pastrami sandwich, so I piled some up on some marble rye And by the way, recent studies have shown that 4 out of 5 indecisive rye bread shoppers choose marble. But anyway, I'm going to serve that up on some rye that's been generously slathered with mustard. And not just any mustard. I snuck a little bit of honey in there, and I'll tell you why in a second. So we'll go ahead and we'll cut that in half and plate it up, and our grilled flank steak pastrami in sandwich form is done. And since I'd already tasted it, I knew it was going to be good. But not surprisingly, it was even better on the bread with the mustard. And the reason we want to sneak a little bit of honey into that mustard is because a traditional corned beef is cured with salt and sugar. So there is a little bit of sweetness in the background, which is not present in this recipe. So to offset that, we'll just do a little sweetness with the mustard. And by the way, I can't help notice you staring at my pickle. That is one of Chef John's famous, naturally fermented dill pickles that, yes, I will be showing you sometime soon. So stay tuned for that. But right now, it's all about this beautiful pastrami-like beef and how really simple, delicious, and relatively fast that was. So I really do hope you give this a try. Head over to foodwishes.com for all the ingredient amounts and more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.